Welcome, Seeker.
What if I told you that a sacred lineage of spiritual warriors once walked this earth? Guardians of a hidden wisdom so dangerous, so pure, that the powers of church and crown united to burn it from history? In the shadows of medieval Europe, nestled among the rugged hills and luminous valleys of southern France, a forgotten people once thrived, the Cathars. They called themselves the good men, the pure ones. But to the dominant church, they were heretics, blasphemers, a spiritual infection that had to be cleansed with fire and steel. What secret did they carry that was worth launching a holy war against them? Why were entire villages, men, women, and children, slaughtered with merciless efficiency? And most importantly, what truths did they possess that were never meant to reach our modern age? This is not just a tale of religious persecution. It is a tale of hidden knowledge, of esoteric teachings, reincarnation, the illusion of the material world, and a direct connection to the divine that bypassed all dogma and institution. The Cathars dared to embody a living gnosis, and for that, they were silenced. But what if their voice never truly died? What if, in the fragments they left behind, in the ruins of Montséjour, in the songs of the troubadours, in the whisper of wind over the Pyrenees, the soul of the Cathar still speaks? In this video, we'll descend into the labyrinth of hidden history. We'll uncover who the Cathars truly were, what they believed, and why their wisdom was seen as a threat so powerful it had to be obliterated from the timeline. Prepare to see history not as it was told, but as it was buried. Let the veil be lifted. To understand the Cathars, we must journey back to a time when Europe was cloaked in both shadow and revelation. The year is 1209. Southern France, the Languedoc region, is a vibrant land of open discourse, spiritual tolerance, and poetic mysticism. Here, troubadours sing of divine love not found in cathedrals, but in the soul's quiet union with the eternal. It is a land where knowledge flows not through papal decree, but through oral transmission, sacred texts, and direct experience. This is the cradle of the Cathar movement. But the roots of their wisdom reach far deeper. The Cathars were not merely Christians with a rebellious streak. They were Gnostics in the truest sense, spiritual descendants of the ancient mystery schools of Alexandria, of the Manichaeans of Persia, of the Bogomils of the Balkans. Their core belief was radical. The material world is not the creation of a benevolent God, but a prison forged by a false, lower power, the demiurge. This is the same demiurge spoken of in Hermetic texts and Gnostic Gospels, the blind artificer, the architect of illusion. To the Cathars, the soul was a divine spark, trapped in flesh, wandering through cycles of reincarnation, yearning to return to the pleroma, the realm of true light. Salvation could not be bought with indulgences or mediated by priests. It had to be earned through purification, knowledge, and a life of radical simplicity and compassion. Their highest initiation was the consolamentum, a spiritual baptism believed to sever the soul's ties to the material world. With this rite, the initiate was no longer bound by karma or illusion. They became what the Cathars called perfecti, purified beings, walking embodiments of the divine. Now imagine the threat this posed. The Cathars rejected all church sacraments. They saw Christ not as a physical savior, but as a being of pure spirit. They refused to bow to the Pope. They denied the necessity of tithes, confession, and even churches. Their very existence undermined the authority of Rome, not just politically, but cosmologically. So, the Church responded in kind, not with debate, but with fire. Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade, a 20-year campaign of terror that culminated in one of the darkest stains on Western history. Entire towns were razed. At Béziers, when asked how to distinguish Cathars from Catholics, a papal legate reportedly said, "Kill them all. God will know his own." But violence was only the beginning. After the sword came the pen. The Inquisition was born in the aftermath, not just to punish heretics, but to erase them from the collective memory. Their books were burned, their teachings suppressed, their names condemned to dust. And yet, something remained. Their symbols, the dove, the Tower of Montsegur, the pure white robes, continue to stir memory. Echoes of their beliefs are found in later mystics, in the Rosicrucians, even in the whispers of modern esoteric orders. Their legacy, though buried, still pulses like an ember beneath ash. They were not extinguished. They were scattered, like seeds awaiting a new season of awakening. And so, we ask, what sacred truth was so dangerous that it had to be annihilated at the root? And why, after such a long time, does their wisdom still reach for us through the veil? Let us now explore the deeper layers of the Cathar vision and the forbidden light it carried. What if the Cathars weren't just religious dissenters? What if they were guardians of a deeper spiritual science, a sacred technology of the soul, hidden in plain sight? At the heart of the Cathar worldview was a startling claim. This world is not real in the way we believe it is. It is not divine. It is not holy. It is a distortion, a counterfeit realm. To them, Earth was a fallen echo of a higher world, what the Hermetists called the nous, what the Gnostics called the pleroma, and what mystics of every age have hinted at, a domain of light, harmony, and truth. The Cathars believed that souls descended into this world not for pleasure or punishment, but because they had become ensnared by the illusions of the material plane, by the trappings of ego, desire, and fear. This was not mere metaphor. The Cathars taught that every soul is a fragment of divine essence, but it has forgotten itself, like a dreamer lost in a nightmare. Their teachings were a map back to remembrance. Unlike the rigid theology of the medieval church, the Cathars offered a living gnosis, a direct inner knowing. They taught that Christ was not a man who came to die for sins, but a being of light who descended to awaken those still trapped in darkness. He was the living archetype of the liberated soul. They rejected the crucifix, not out of heresy, but out of reverence. To them, the crucifix symbolized the victory of matter over spirit, the triumph of the demiurge over the light. True Christ was never crucified, not in spirit. Instead, the Cathars focused on purification through vegetarianism, chastity, nonviolence, and deep inner contemplation. The world was a battlefield of forces, light and shadow, spirit and matter, and the soul was the field upon which that war was waged. But here is the key. They did not see this as a war of hate, but of transcendence. Not to destroy the world, but to see through it. This is where their philosophy becomes almost alchemical, like the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. The Cathars believed that liberation of the soul mirrored the restoration of the cosmos. The more souls awakened, the more this false world would dissolve, revealing the kingdom of light hidden beneath the veil. They spoke of reincarnation, a spiral journey, life after life, where the soul learns, burns away its illusions, and ascends toward the source. This stood in stark contrast to the Church's rigid binary of heaven and hell. In the Cathar worldview, damnation was not a punishment from a wrathful God, but the soul's own ignorance, the endless cycle of forgetting. They claimed that at the end of this journey, the soul would reunite with the divine, not as a servant, but as a flame rejoining the fire. This was liberation not through obedience, but through illumination. And perhaps that was the greatest threat of all, because if salvation lies within, if priests are no longer needed, if sacredness is found not in temples, but in consciousness itself, then the entire foundation of religious control begins to tremble. And tremble it did. The Cathars lived what they believed. Their perfecti, the initiated ones, owned nothing, harmed no one, served with humility, and radiated a serenity that even their enemies begrudgingly respected. Some chroniclers wrote that even as the fires of the Inquisition were lit, Cathars walked into the flames singing. What kind of knowledge makes one face death with joy? What inner light did they see that burned brighter than fear? Before we go further, reflect on this. Have you ever felt that this world is not your home? That something vital, something ancient, lies buried within you, waiting to awaken? The Cathars would say, you are not imagining it. You are remembering, and that memory is the key. If this resonates, you're part of a deeper search. Subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments, not just to follow this path, but to illuminate it for others still wandering in the dark. Why was a movement rooted in peace, purity, and illumination met with such ferocity? Why were thousands of Cathars hunted, tortured, and burned alive, not for crimes, but for a vision of reality? The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. The Cathars were not erased simply for heresy. They were erased because they held a spiritual technology that could unravel the dominion of empire. Their cosmology was more than belief. It was a threat to the metaphysical monopoly of the church and the political structures it served. You see, in the Cathar view, salvation didn't come from obedience to an institution, but from an inner alchemy, a transformation of consciousness. Imagine the implications. If Christ is within, if the soul is eternal and reincarnates until it remembers its true origin, if the world is a construct maintained by illusion, then kings lose their divine right, priests lose their power to forgive sins, and the machinery of fear, the most ancient tool of control, begins to rust. To maintain the illusion, those who see through it must be silenced. Enter the Albigensian Crusade, a brutal campaign launched in 1209 by Pope Innocent III. It wasn't just a military conquest. It was a spiritual extermination, a genocide waged not merely on people, but on ideas. One of the most chilling commands issued by a papal legate during the siege of Béziers: kill them all. God will know his own. It is said that over 20,000 people were slaughtered, men, women, children, Cathar or not. The Inquisition followed, a machinery of terror designed not just to kill, but to erase. Libraries were destroyed, scrolls vanished, oral teachings were extinguished with fire and blade. The perfecti, the bearers of living gnosis, were hunted with a precision that hints at something more than religious zealotry. It was a targeted strike on spiritual memory. But ask yourself, why such violence, unless the Cathars possessed something real? Why the systematic attempt to wipe out not just a sect, but a sacred science? Here's where it deepens. There are whispers, fragments, and apocryphal texts, mentions in Gnostic circles, that the Cathars were custodians of forbidden wisdom passed down from the early mystery schools. Some believe they held remnants of Egyptian Hermeticism, that they inherited secrets from the Essenes, who foretold the coming of the light bearer, that they carried a spiritual lineage stretching back to Atlantis or beyond. Too far-fetched? Perhaps. And yet, among their symbols was the Labyrinth, an ancient motif of spiritual rebirth. In their teachings were echoes of the ascent of the soul through planetary spheres, mirroring Hermetic, Orphic, and Pythagorean cosmologies. They were not rebels. They were rememberers. And like all who remember too much in an age of forgetting, they became dangerous. The church called them heretics. But heretic, from the Greek hertikos, means one who chooses. The Cathars chose to awaken, and that choice shattered the illusion of control. Even in death, they did not beg. They ascended. Stories abound of Cathars walking into fire with serenity, even joy, believing they would return again, reborn, until the great work was done. So, ask yourself, is it possible the Cathars didn't disappear, but scattered like embers, hidden across the centuries, waiting to ignite once more? Is it possible that you, watching this now, are drawn not by chance, but by a memory stirring in your soul? Because the Cathars believed the light could never be destroyed, only buried, and one day it would rise again. Perhaps that day is today. What if you're not discovering this, but remembering it? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to journey deeper into the wisdom they tried to erase. The Cathars were not merely philosophers or dissidents. They were practitioners of the sacred. They lived what they taught. And while their bodies were burned, their path, their way, was never truly lost. So how do we apply the Cathar teachings today? How do we walk the forgotten path of the perfecti in a world that still runs on illusion? It begins with a single truth the Cathars held sacred. The divine spark is within you, not in a temple, not behind ritual or hierarchy, but in the silent core of your being, waiting. They called this spark the light, the ray from the true God. To connect with it, the Cathars practiced interior purity, a discipline of aligning thought, word, and action with truth. Not religious dogma, but direct knowing, gnosis. Here are 3 living practices drawn from their legacy, reimagined for the modern seeker. 1. The practice of inner catharsis. The Cathars believed the material world was a snare, not to be hated, but transcended. To do this, one must purify perception. Each day, find 10 minutes to sit in complete silence. No music, no mantra, just awareness. Ask, what is real in me, and what is constructed? Let thoughts rise and fall like smoke. This isn't meditation for peace. It's for clarity, to see the difference between the soul's voice and the noise of the world. 2. The discipline of compassionate detachment. The Cathars rejected violence, not just in war, but in spirit. They taught radical compassion, not enabling, but liberating. Try this. The next time someone wrongs you, instead of reacting, pause, say internally, this soul is also on the path of return. Then choose your response not from anger or fear, but from presence. This is not weakness. It is a warrior's calm, a recognition that all beings are divine sparks caught in illusion, trying to awaken. 3. The ritual of sacred remembrance. Once a week, at dusk or dawn, create your own oratory. A simple space, a candle, a symbol of light, a journal. Ask yourself, where did I act from truth this week? Where did I serve the illusion? Write without judgment, just awareness. This is your inner inquisition, not for punishment, but liberation. As the Cathars believed, each act of honesty polishes the mirror of the soul, until the light once buried begins to shine again. But remember, Cathar spirituality was communal. They didn't walk the path alone. They gathered in secret places, in caves and forests, around whispered prayers and shared visions. And so must we. This video, this channel, this gathering of minds, it's more than content. It's a modern Cathar revival. So connect, comment, share your insight. Because to remember alone is to awaken a spark, but to remember together is to ignite a flame. In the end, the Cathars didn't die. They scattered. They hid in the veins of time, waiting for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. You are one of them. Now polish the mirror, tend the flame, and walk the path they tried to erase. Do you feel the memory stirring? Tell us in the comments, and if this truth calls to you, subscribe and walk with us into the hidden light. They were called heretics, branded by flame, hunted through forests and mountains like ghosts of a forgotten gospel. But the Cathars were not heretics. They were guardians of a deeper truth, a truth too dangerous, too liberating for the powers of their age to tolerate. They taught that God does not sit upon a throne of judgment, but resides within. that salvation does not come through fear, but through inner awakening. They refused to kneel before the material world because they saw beyond it, and for that, they were erased. But here's the secret their enemies never understood. You cannot burn a truth that lives in the soul. You cannot silence a teaching written in the heart of humanity itself. Today, their voices echo not in stone cathedrals, but in you, in every seeker who questions the illusions of this world, in every soul who dares to believe there is something more, something truer, purer, eternal. So, what now? The path of the Cathars isn't just history. It is a living current. And if you've listened this far, it means the current has found you. This is your invitation to remember, to seek, to awaken, to light the hidden flame they tried to extinguish, and in doing so, become a beacon for others lost in the darkness. Because the Cathars were never truly destroyed. They were planted like seeds, and now they are rising. In silence, in fire, in you. If this truth speaks to something ancient within you, subscribe and join this growing circle of seekers. Share your thoughts below. Let your voice become part of the chorus that can no longer be silenced. The Cathars have returned, not in flesh, but in flame. And now, so have you.